I'm here with Travis Hanson at Team O'Neill Rally School, and we're going to talk about how to drive a rear-wheel drive car such as your Porsche on a loose surface. What are some tips and tricks that we're going to go over in that BMW back there to help out our Porsche owners driving in loose surface conditions in a rear-wheel drive vehicle?
Yeah, I think that the first problem that everyone probably thinks of when they're driving on a loose surface is a wheel spin. And more applicable to losing control would be wheel spin oversteer, right? You get on the gas too aggressively in a corner, and you get a little bit of wheel spin on the rear two tires, and all of a sudden the rear end's chasing the front end and you're spun out, right? So in general, what we say is that you just have to be much more smooth with the application of the gas, and probably slower with the application of the gas. Because if you go from no throttle to full throttle, you're immediately going to get wheel spin. But if you take your time, right, you can still get to full throttle, but you have to do it gradually. And with each kind of graduation of the gas pedal, you're getting a little bit of weight transfer to the rear tires and gaining more weight to allow you to give yourself a little bit more gas and a little more weight and a little bit more gas until you can kind of get to full throttle. So that's the first problem that we run into. And then the next problem as far as rear-wheel drive on a loose surface is probably wheel lockup. Because if you're used to driving a front-wheel drive or an all-wheel drive car, the engine is forcing those front wheels to stay turning, right? But in a rear-wheel drive car, you get on the brakes really hard. There's nothing really forcing those wheels to stay in motion, so they tend to lock up much quicker on a slippery surface. So it's kind of the same story where you have to take your time and be very gradual with the brake pressure. You can't get full brake pressure all at once in a rear-wheel drive car, mostly just because you don't have the grip. Maybe in the summertime when you got pavement, you get away with full throttle really quickly or full brake pressure really quickly, but the slipperier it is, the more time you have to take with your feet.
Yep.
Okay, so we're driving on snow and ice today in this rear-wheel drive car. One of the first things you think about is when you just leave the stop sign and you get on the gas a little bit too quickly, you're going to get wheel spin, right? So if I kind of dump the clutch and get on the gas, right, we don't go anywhere very fast, do we? I can, all sorts of RPMs, we're not going anywhere. Where I could take my time a little bit more and gradually get on the gas. One, I'm going to maintain some grip. Plus, with each little graduation of the gas, I'm getting some weight transfer to the rear two tires and gaining grip in doing so, right? So I kind of take my time and gradually get a little more and a little more and a little more and a little more gas, and all of a sudden we're going pretty fast. And you can shift up a little bit quicker too, right? To avoid any sort of wheel spin, right? If you shift to maybe second gear a little quicker, you've got less torque multiplication, you can have less wheel spin in that way. So you kind of short shift your car whenever you're trying to accelerate. The other thing that you could run into with a rear-wheel drive car is that once you are moving and you're on a really slippery surface, you try to slow down, right? And if you brake too hard too quick, you just get wheel lockup, right? And nothing happens, right? You don't slow down, you're not able to control the vehicle. Braking too quickly can cause wheel lockup, especially in a rear-wheel drive car because you don't have any drive going to the front two wheels. So if we get going again, and I take my time this time getting on the brakes, kind of slowing down gradually, more and more brake pressure, I can come to a stop that much quicker, right? And it's the same sort of thing where I slowly get on the brake pressure, I slowly move some weight forward, and all of a sudden I can slow down pretty well with a lot of weight transfer to the front two wheels by braking.
So a problem that I ran into when I was going through the rear-wheel drive program here was countersteering. I countersteered to an extent, and then my instructor would say, countersteer. And I was like, I am. Well, I wasn't doing it enough. In a rear-wheel drive car, you have to anticipate. What are some tips for anticipating and countersteering?
Yeah, so the idea is that with a rear-wheel drive car, and you're doing any form of throttle steering the vehicle, the rear end is going to oversteer quite a bit, right? So you have to be kind of prepared in a way with the steering and very proactive with the steering, especially if you're at all, aggressive with the gas, right? So I'll kind of show you two examples where, one, I kind of get into a skid but don't countersteer, right? So I'm going to get into a skid here and I don't countersteer. I countersteer too slow. We spin right out, I gave it some countersteer. It was kind of wimpy. but I wasn't really countersteering with any aggression or anything like that, or I wasn't keeping up with the oversteer, right? So on a loose surface, you have to be more proactive, let's say, right? And we can kind of get to the same spot, maybe, if we don't get stuck. Oh, here we are again, stuck. So icy out here.
And no, we're not in a snowbank.
Just stuck on flat ground. Okay, so this time when we get into the oversteer skid, I'm going to be very proactive about my countersteer, and before we even get into some form of skid, I'm already countersteering and I can maintain control, and I'm already countersteering the other way, and I can get in all sorts of oversteer type of skids as long as I countersteer, right? As long as I countersteer very quickly, I can maintain control. And I'm always proactive about it. I'm always trying to countersteer before the car gets too sideways. If you're letting it get sideways and then trying to react, you're going to be behind. Versus countersteering in advance and getting on the throttle to make the car oversteer. I got to countersteer first and then get on the gas. Countersteer the other way and then get on the gas. And that way, I'm always being in front of the vehicle. You know, I'm kind of driving the vehicle rather than the vehicle driving me. So countersteering in advance of the oversteer skid is one of the most important things that you need to do when you're driving a rear-wheel drive car on a very slippery surface.